Namaste and welcome to today's lecture. The topic of today's lecture is Power of Words. I am Dr. Rinki Jadwani, and in this lecture I will be discussing the concepts of Abhidha, Lakshana and Vyanjana. The next topic will be to analyze these powers according to Indian Vyakaran Shastra, Indian philosophical schools of Nyaya and Mimamsa, and also with respect to Kavya Shastra. As we all know, words are said to be the tools for conveying the meaning, and the process of conveying this meaning is called word power, or it is also called Shabda Shakti. We can say that the power which conveys meaning of a word is called Shabda Shakti. It is also called by some scholars as Vritti or Vyapar. The concept of Shabda Shakti basically refers to the detailed exposition of the potency or the capability, which is also called Shakti, of words in conveying the meaning. It is the process of expressing its inherent meaning. It is said that the essential nature of a word lies in its Shakti or significative power. We have three kinds of words, and accordingly we have three kinds of meaning. So word is the sound that we hear, and the sanket that we get from that sound is its meaning. Words are of three kinds. The first is called vachak, the second is called lakshak, and the third is called vyanjak. And accordingly, there are three types of meanings. The first is literal meaning, the second is figurative meaning, and the third is called the suggestive meaning. So we find three powers of word accordingly. These three powers of words are called Abhidha, Lakshana and Vyanjana. Meaning comes in these three ways in a word. These powers of a word are named on the basis of the three sources of meaning. Now, when it comes to define these three powers or Shabda Shakti, so what are these three powers? The first, Abhidha, is called the primary meaning. Lakshana is the intended meaning related to the primary meaning. But when it comes to define Vyanjana, so Vyanjana neither gives a sense of the primary meaning nor the intended meaning, but it gives a different meaning from both of them. We use Vyanjana when the meaning transcends beyond the limits of Abhidha and Lakshana. So we have three kinds of word, as you can see, Vachak, Lakshak and Vyanjak, and respectively we have three kinds of meaning or artha. These three kinds of artha are called Vachyarth, Lakshyarth and Vyanjanarth. And the associated power or Shakti is called Abhidha and Lakshana and Vyanjana. Now explaining the first power or Shabda Shakti, which is Abhidha. So as I already earlier discussed, that Abhidha is the power of a word that reveals its primary, common and direct meaning. It is the meaning that comes to mind immediately upon hearing the word. It is called Vachyarth, which is literal meaning. For example, the word book refers to a physical object with pages. Abhidha is used when a word is employed in its original sense without any hidden or secondary meaning. Acharya Mammat in his work Kavya Prakash defines Abhidha as the indicated meaning, that is, the meaning that is instantly understood from the word's common usage. Abhidha ensures clarity in poetry and prose. Even though Kavya Prakash ultimately emphasizes the beauty of suggestion, which is Vyanjana, Abhidha is said to be the necessary base upon which poetic meaning is constructed. It is the most fundamental power of a word. Grammarians like Panini and Patanjali considered Abhida as the fundamental function of language. The structure and rules laid out in the Ashtadhyayi depend heavily on the assumption that words primarily operate through Abhida. We will now discuss the classification of words. So, words are divided into four classes according to different ways in which their meaning is determined. First is Rudi, or it is also called conventional. These words indicate the jati. The meaning of these words is not directly connected with its derivation. Like, for example, we have the words like cow, which is called gau, and pot, which is called ghat. Second is yogic or derivative. The meaning of these words is obtained through the power of anvay. Anvay means component, so we get the meaning of these words by the components. For example, we have words like Divakar and Ghatkar. Third type is Yog Rood, or it is called derivative conventional. Their meaning is obtained through the power of samudaya and anvay. These words are ruled in spite of being yogic words. Here the meaning of derivative and conventional coincide and refer to the same object like jalaj and varij, etc. So, when it comes to define their yogic meaning, so their yogic meaning is any object that grows in water, that is mud, but the yoga root meaning is only lotus. The fourth kind is yogic root. It is derivative or conventional. When the meaning of the word can be ascertained either etymologically from the meanings of its components, parts, or conventionally from the usage by the whole word taken together. For example, the word ashwagandha is used in its etymological sense, that is, of having the smell of a horse, and it is also used popularly as the name of a popular plant. The key point here to note is that all schools of thought in India accept that the meaning current in popular usage is more authoritative than the etymological meaning. Panini says that the authority of the popular usage of words must always supersede the authority of meaning, which is dependent on derivation. Patanjali also holds that the usage of educated people who actually speak the language is the final authority on the application of words. For the Mimamsakas, Rudi is always stronger than Yog. However, they never denied the importance of etymology, but they say that it must always be overruled by the conventional usage. Next is the nature of the relation between word and meaning. As it is already discussed in the introduction that the significative power of a word is called Shakti. According to Bhartrhari, who was the ancient grammarian and philosopher, words are infused with potency, which is Shakti, that transcends their phonetic form. So, the nature of this relation of the meaning with words can be of two types. First is the theory of a natural origin, and second is the conventional origin of this relation. This natural and conventional origin is accepted respectively by Mimamsa and Nyaya schools of philosophy. So, Nyaya does not accept the natural or eternal relationship between words and their meaning. Nyaya and Vaisheshik advocate the conventional origin of this relationship. Gautam says that the meaning is understood by conventional significance. The Naiyayikas present the argument that the word does not coexist with the object it denotes. The word, for example, the word fire does not burn the mouth and razor does not cut it, nor does the word honey sweeten the mouth. In Tarksangra also, we find that Shakti is defined as the convention made by the will of God that such and such a meaning should be understood by such and such a word. However, the later Nayayikas say that it is not always by the will of God, but sometimes it can also be by the will of a person. When this conventional relation or sanket is established by the will of God, it is called permanent and it is called abhidha or shakti. And when it is not permanent, it is called paribhasha. Bhartrhari also mentions these two types of relationship. Sanket is of two kinds, he says. The first is ajanika or permanent, and the second is adhunik or modern. Ajanika refers to primary permanent meaning, and adhunik refers to the technical terms with their well defined and specialized meaning. In both these cases, the relation between the word and the meaning is direct. According to Mimamsa, the significative power or Shakti is inherent in the words themselves. For them, the relation between word and meaning is permanent and eternal, as the origin of this relationship cannot be traced back to a person. This natural connection between words and their meanings has also been explained in terms of innate capacity or yogyata of words. Mimamsakas hold that the primary meaning of a word is the universal and it is the essential quality common to the particular instances of the class. They argue that it would be impossible to understand meaning of a word, say for example cow, if it has to be understood with respect to all particular cows. Now we will explain the second Shabda Shakti, which is Lakshana. So it is said that when Abhidha becomes ineffective, the power through which the meaning of a word is understood is called Lakshana. We can take an example from Tulsidas Ramcharitmanas. So, this example is taken from Ramcharitmanas. Ram crossed the Ganga. Here in this example, crossed the Ganga primarily means crossing the river, but in this context, it symbolizes the beginning of a new journey in Ram's life. This secondary meaning exemplifies Lakshana. Now, there are three essential conditions that are necessary for Lakshana. The first is the inapplicability of the primary meaning in the context. The second is some relation between primary meaning and the actual referent of the word. And the third one is sanction for the transferred sense. Now we will discuss the types of Lakshana. So, there are four kinds of Lakshana. The first is Jahat Lakshana or exclusive indicative. In this type of Lakshana, the primary meaning is completely abundant. The famous example of this type of Lakshana is Gangayam Gosha. It means that the village is on the Ganges. Here the primary meaning, that is on the flowing river, is abundant because it becomes impractical. The secondary meaning, that is on the bank of Ganges, is taken here. On hearing a word, the normal meaning occurs to our mind, but we resort to this secondary meaning or Lakshana when the primary meaning is found to be incompatible with the context. Only then we can get the actual sense. Thus, the meaning of the example, like the stage is angry, would be the person on the stage is angry, which becomes clear through the context. Acharya Mammat argues in his work Kavya Prakash that there cannot be complete detachment between the primary and the actual referent, even in the example like Gangayam Gosha, since the intended element underlying the transfer could be got only by understanding their identity. The second kind of Lakshana is Ajaha Lakshana. It is also called inclusive indicative. In this type of Lakshana, the primary meaning is retained partially. The example is the boy is a lion. Here, the courage of the lion is transferred to the boy. So, we can say that the word lion is not completely abundant in this example. Mammat calls this kind of Lakshana as Upadan Lakshana, and according to Bhattamimamsakas, the primary meaning is universal as already discussed. So, its power is exhausted on expressing the general sense, and the meaning of particular has to be got through Ajaha Lakshana. However, Mammat does not accept the necessity of assuming Lakshana to get the particular from that of universal. He follows the view of Prabhakar, who holds that on account of invariable connection between universal and particular, the latter is cognized as implied in the former. The third one is Jahad Ajaha Lakshana. It means simultaneously abandonment and retention. So, this is called a middle path also, where only an aspect of primary meaning is preserved and the rest is rejected. The example of this type of Lakshana is that village is burnt. So, it is only a part of the village that is burnt, and only a part of the primary meaning, that is village, is retained. Vedantins accept this third type of Lakshana as they have to explain sentences like Tattvam Asi and Aham Brahmasmi. So, like in cases of Tattvam Asi, Tvam as a part of the sentence does not mean Shvetketu, the son of Uddalaka, but it means as devoid of all individual attributes. Similarly, Tad, which is that, here means the universal soul and which is devoid of all qualifications such as omniscience. These examples show that a word gives up one part of its primary meaning and retains another part. Another type of classification in this second Shabda Shakti Lakshana is Gauni and Shuddha Lakshana. So, Gauni Lakshana is based on the similarity of primary meaning. For example, when we say that, the particular person is a bull, so a person who is lazy is usually called a bull. Thus, the implied meaning of the above example would be that person is lazy like a bull. Here the meaning is hidden, which is expressed by comparing it with a bull. The comparison of that person with bull is done on the basis of similarity. This similarity or resemblance between two different terms is shown through metaphor and not by simile, because simile basically shows both resemblance and difference, but metaphor shows only resemblance, which is tadatmya sambandh. So, Gauni Lakshana, it is said that, is based on metaphor only and not on simile. Shuddha Lakshana, on the other hand, is not based on similarity. It is based on the relation of cause and effect, owner and owned, or part and whole, etc. For example, when we say that ghee is life, in this example, ghee is identified with life. So, in a kind of indifference or tadatmya is shown between ghee and life. There is no similarity between ghee and life. Ghee is something that drives and protects our lives. So, only in this sense, ghee is said to be equated with our lives. Now, we will discuss Bhartrhari's views on Lakshana. So, for Bhartrhari, the unit of speech is sentence, which he considers an indivisible unit. Also, for him, the meaning of a sentence is not equal to the meaning of the component words of that sentence. So, Bhartrhari argues that it is meaningless to discuss the primary and secondary reference of an individual word. It is the sentence that has to be considered as a whole unit of meaning and in the context in which it is used. For example, if a mother says to her child that the tiger eats children who cry, she does not mean here that if her child cries, he will be eaten by the tiger. What she means here is only that her child should not cry. Thus, it is not possible to explain all such usage satisfactorily by resorting to metaphorical meaning of particular words in a sentence. Now, we come to our third Shabda Shakti, which is Vyanjana. So, we'll explain now this Shabda Shakti. So, Anandavardhan in his work Dhvanyalok talks about this third potency of language, and he explains it as the capacity to suggest a meaning other than its literal meaning. This suggestive power of language is called Vyanjana. It unlocks many layers of meanings which is inaccessible through the other two, namely Abhidha and Lakshana. Anandavardhan includes all contextual factors like the intonation, stress, gestures, and even the pure sounds used in a sentence, and also the literal sense as the indicator of full meaning of an utterance. The aim of Anandavardhan was to establish a theory of Dhvani, which is Vyanjana applied to poetry. For example, she looked at him and he forgot the word. The literal meaning here and any metaphor are surpassed by the emotion or sentiment, we can say rasa, suggested, that can be like love, distraction, or enchantment. Anandavardhan used this term Dhvani for his theory of poetic suggestion, and Dhvani is applied to suggestive poetry when the suggested sense predominates over the literal sense. So, he asserts in his work Dhvanyalok that suggestion is the soul of poetry, and Vyanjana basically transcends the literal and engages the reader in an aesthetic experience. It makes Kavya evocative and emotional. This suggested meaning may be of three kinds. It may be an idea, a figure of speech, or an emotion. This suggested sense is the most important element in poetry, and it is understood only by those who know the essence of poetry and not by those who know only grammar and lexicon. The notion of Dhvani can be said to be an extension of rasa theory propounded by Bharat Muni. He says that the main element of a dramatic work is to arouse a rasa or aesthetic emotion in the audience. Suggestion basically is not enough by itself in poetry. It must be charming also, and charm comes from rasa or emotion, and emotion is something which is not expressed directly from words, it can only be suggested. Abhinav Gupta also elaborated on Anandavardhan's ideas, integrating Vyanjana with rasa theory. For him, Vyanjana brings about rasa anubhav, which is aesthetic experience. When we talk about Nyaya and Mimamsa school of philosophy, so they were more interested in precision and accuracy in the use of words. So that is the reason why they do not accept the suggestive power of words, and Nyaya includes Dhvani under inference. They argue that the nature of suggestive meaning is vague and fleeting, so it cannot have any place in logical meanings. Anandavardhan argues against the inference theory and says that inference depends upon the knowledge of Vyapti, which is the invariable connection between the middle and major terms in a proposition. But we do not find such invariable connection between the primary meaning and the suggestive meaning in literature. Thus, the latter cannot be inferred from the former. Indian literary critics do not deny this claim that every word has a fixed and literal meaning, but they believe that there is a suggestive meaning over and above all these, which may vary from context to context. This suggestive meaning, we can say, includes everything other than the literal meaning, and meaning does not only include the information which is conveyed but also the emotions induced. The theory of Dhwani expands the term meaning or artha to include all that can be conveyed by a poem. Many of the criticism against this theory are because of the fact that poets and literary critics do not confine themselves to a relatively small portion of language behavior which is definite, but they try to extend it to the totality of human experience, including the emotional. And with this, I would like to conclude this lecture. So, as we saw that Shabda Shakti offers a profound understanding of how language functions in Indian intellectual traditions. The tripartite division of Abhidha, Lakshana and Vyanjana captures not just linguistic but also cognitive and aesthetic dimensions of meaning. In grammar and logic, the emphasis remains on Abhidha and Lakshana for clarity and precision. And in poetics, Vyanjana becomes the central element, elevating language into the realm of art. A complete understanding of Indian theories of meaning thus requires us to consider all these three functions not in isolation but as interdependent forces that shape the living reality of language. I hope this lecture would be helpful in enriching the understanding of the Shabda Shakti. Thank you.